Welcome. My name is Meredith Toohey, and I'm the Director of Programmatic Operations at the American Nutrition Association, the ANA. The ANA is very pleased to be hosting Dr. Mark Tager for a webinar titled Personalized Nutrition for Skin, Health, and Beauty. Dr. Mark Tager is CEO of Changewell Inc., a San Diego organization that trains and coaches healthcare practitioners to enhance their presence in person, on camera, and online. A veteran of more than 1,000 presentations, Mark shares his skills and passion to empower those who attend his trainings. As a physician, he is well grounded in aesthetic, lifestyle, regenerative, and integrative medicine. A highly sought after speaker and consultant, he has lectured and trained extensively in the United States, Europe, and Asia. Mark is active with many functional, integrative, and anti-aging medical associations. He received his undergraduate and medical degrees from Duke University and trained in family practice at the University of Oregon Health Sciences Center. Welcome, Dr. Tager.
Welcome to this webinar on personalized nutrition for skin health and beauty. I'm Dr. Mark Tager. These are my disclosures. I will not be talking about any products in this session today. I do want to point out that I was a producer for the American Nutrition Association's Personalized Nutrition for Practitioner course. You can find information about that course on the ANA site. So let's talk a little bit about the objectives. Today, we're going to talk about building the case for a collaborative approach between nutrition professionals and aesthetic professionals. I'll be reviewing the anatomy of the skin and how it ages. We'll discuss how diet affects skin aging. I'll overview the personalized nutrition assessments that we use for skin health and beauty. And finally, we'll provide a framework for intelligent supplementation for those practitioners who are concerned about helping patients get glowing skin. So this is me with the only two females in my household who listen to me. I was an early pioneer in integrative medicine way back in the 70s. I've done a lot of presentations. I've got experience in health promotion, functional and regenerative medicine, but equally so in aesthetic medicine, where I help bring the Fraxel laser to market. I do a lot of coaching and presenting. I work with many of the leading associations, and I am the author of 11 books, the latest one being Feed Your Skin Right, Your Personalized Nutrition Plan for Radiant Beauty. I've trained at Duke University in medical school and family practice in Oregon. And I'll be drawing today from many of the concepts in the book. And really, what I set out to do in this particular book was answer the 4 questions that every woman I know, mainly women, have asked me since I've been in practice. And what should I eat? What supplements should I take? What topicals should I apply? And what procedure should I have? There is a simple answer to this, to these 4 questions, and that is, really, there's just one thing. The answer? It depends. And that's what the book's about, what it depends on. And that's what we'll be speaking about today specifically as we look at this personalized approach to building skin health and beauty from within. So very often when I speak to practitioners, I like to think that there's a big room that we want to get people into. And this is the room of optimal well-being. And there are many doors into this room, but one of the biggest ones is the door of skin health and beauty. And I've got 5 key messages that I want to get across in skin health and beauty. And that is, first of all, and I'm sure so many of you would agree with me, there is no substitute for a crappy diet. You can't out-supplement someone's crappy diet. The next piece is that there is no other person on the planet with skin that is just like yours. So the treatments also that address your gut and the brain also help the skin. And there is a rationale to add specific supplements for skin beauty, keeping in mind that the best skin supplements take advantage of natural synergies. So I coined this term integrative aesthetics, which I talk about in the book, and here's what it is. It is really the personalized assessments, treatments, and counseling that recognize skin health and beauty as highly dependent upon multiple organ systems that are affected by genomics, lifestyle, and environment. Now, I'm going to start off with the business focus, and then we'll move clinically. So here's the one take-home for those of you who are professionals in nutrition. I am going to encourage you to collaborate. to invite an aesthetic professional for coffee. Tell them what you do, ask them what they do, see if they have any sort of interest or orientation around skin health and beauty from the inside out. Increasingly, so many of the younger practitioners are getting tuned into this. Now, you might ask, well, why should an aesthetic professional, maybe who's doing Botox and fillers and laser treatments, why should they care about personalized nutrition? Here are the reasons. The first is medicine is a business. Aesthetics is a business. We want to respond to patients' interests, their needs and wants. Practitioners today recognize that if they get tissue health optimized, they will get better clinical outcomes. And one way of doing that certainly is with nutrition. They also, particularly the younger ones, again, I've mentioned this, they want to distinguish their practice. They want to be different from the practice down the street. Some of them see this as adding a revenue stream, but increasingly, we are seeing that this is a personal interest, sometimes a passion of some of these aesthetic practitioners. We've got a $55 billion nutritional supplement industry, of which 2.8%, a little over $1.5 billion, is devoted to hair, skin, and nails. And in aesthetics, we talk about something called prejuvenation. It is the recognition that younger and younger and younger patients keep coming into the aesthetic offices, and they want more than just lips for those selfies. Increasingly, they are concerned about health. In fact, when we look at this survey done from the Nutrition Business Journal, we can see that millennials care more about and think more about their health than do Gen X and boomers, and they also look for ways to become healthier. Now, you might ask, well, wait a minute, if I take this practitioner to lunch, we talk a little bit, am I worried that they're going to take patients away from me? Stop. These practitioners will never match your level of skills and competency. And then, even if they did, very few of them will organize their practice and acquire the resources to do the comprehensive testing and the counseling for behavior change. So I think the best thing is the collaboration between nutrition professionals and aesthetic professionals. So this may be familiar to many of you, but how does diet contribute to beautiful skin? I think it does it many, many ways. The first is we can slow down inflammaging. We can reduce glycation. Now, glycation is critical because when we have all of these glucose molecules and they begin attaching to proteins and lipids, they also attach to collagen. And when they do that, the collagen goes from being nice and supple to being very stiff and brittle, and that contributes to fine lines and wrinkles. We want to improve the leaky gut because leaky gut, brain, skin, it's all connected. We want to help build those short-chain fatty acids. Now, when we feed people the roughage, the fiber that they need, they create butyrate, sure, and that helps. That's a short-chain fatty acid. Helps with the gut lining, but also propionate, which goes into the bloodstream and is widely distributed and gets into the skin, where it is a very important ingredient. Now, of these 5,000 phytonutrients, the real purpose of many of these phytonutrients is to protect the plant from the sun. So when we eat phytonutrients, antioxidants, we gain about maybe 3-4, an SPF of 3 or 4. So they do offer mild sun protection when we lean on fruits and vegetables. We can improve the skin barrier, not just with ceramides from the outside, but ceramides from the inside, lipids that are very specific protection for the skin barrier. We can slow down mitochondrial skin aging. How does the skin age? The way other organs ages. It ages via the reduction in the number and efficiency and effectiveness of mitochondria. And finally, the skin is part of the innate immune system, and we want to protect that immune function as well as we can. Diet contributes to all of that. So the first one is that there is no substitute for a crabby diet. And there's so many barriers to healthy nourishment. We've got the low nutritional content in food, the exposure to toxins, the standard American diet, inflammation, leaky gut. And this always amazes me that if this is the NIH data from NHANES studies, and these are the percent of dietary intake below the average requirements. Now, the average, remember, is adjusted for age and sex, and it is only healthy individuals, and it is the amount to satisfy the need of 50%, just 50%, healthy adults. Got it? Look at that. Vitamin D, 94%, vitamin E, 89%, magnesium, 52%, calcium, 44%, vitamin C, 39%, vitamin K, 67%, choline, 92%. So you can see that we're just not getting the minerals that we need in our diet and the vitamins. Another area that is problematic is DNDs, the drug nutrient depletions. And I think we really want to ask questions and look at every single drug that our patients are taking to see where they're depleting some of these key nutrients. For example, statins. 35 million Americans take statins. And we know that they deplete CoQ10, which is essential for mitochondrial well-being, but also the fat-soluble vitamins. So put this all together, this begins now to be more of a personal approach. But now let's segue, because I'm sure many of you know a lot about nutrition and about diet and supplements, but maybe less so about skin. So let's look at the skin. It's the largest organ by surface. It's any place from 1.2 to 2.2 square meters. It weighs about 9 pounds or 7% of the total body weight. The thickness varies from 0.5 millimeter on the eyelids to 4 millimeters on the soles of the feet. The skin maintains a barrier, an acid barrier between 4 and 5. Now, we talk about this as being part of the acid mantle, which is a hydrolipid film in which the sebum and the acid work together to protect the skin. It's protection against pathogenic bacteria, virus, and fungi. It helps to balance the skin microbiome. This is when we have the optimal production of epidermal lipids and the optimal action of the enzymes that are involved in desquamation, and the best renewal of the stratum corneum, which is the outer layer of the skin. So the skin functions in terms of barrier protection, protects against radiation from sunlight, from pathogens, from extreme temperatures, from mechanical trauma, from chemicals. And the skin also has its sensory receptors, so it's always sending signals back via the Merkel cells back to the brain and sensing heat, cold, light touch, heavy touch, etc. It is, as you know, a metabolic organ, participating very actively in vitamin D synthesis and in terms of energy regulation with triglycerides. So let's go to look at the layers of the skin. And this is always interesting to me. Now, I can't do it, but you probably could if you just were to pluck one hair from your head. Okay? Can give you a minute to do that. It's pretty hard for me. If you look at the cross-section, it's about 150 microns. That is the depth of the epidermis, the outer layer of the skin. So if we look at each layer, we've got the epidermis, which is just 150 microns. We go down into the dermis, that's about 2,500 microns. And the hypodermis is beneath that, and that's about 3 millimeters. So these are the relative depths of the skin, something important to sort of keep in mind. So the epidermis is the first line of defense. It's the protective barrier. It's strong because of, first of all, these tight junctions between the skin cells and the protective layer, which is keratin. It protects against excess water loss. In fact, when we do skin studies, we assess transepidermal water loss. It also protects the skin by producing the melanin and contributes to the vitamin D production. So this epidermis is in a state of constant renewal. So what happens is it takes any place from 28 to 45 days for the skin to completely renew itself. Older people, more in 45 days. Younger people in the 20s. One of the reasons we use retinol is it enhances skin turnover for these keratinocytes. And you can see that there's a migration of the keratinocytes. We'll talk a little bit about that. We're starting at the base layer, the stratum basale. And what's important here is that these are where the stem cells reside. This is the junction, this very important junction, we'll come back to this, between the epidermis and the dermis. As you can see, as these cells move up, they age, they start losing their nuclei, they start flattening out, and they become this dead, horny layer, which is the stratum corneum. So the epidermis is mainly keratinocytes, that's about 90%, and then the stem cells. And we also will see, coming from the basal layer, these melanocytes that produce the pigment melanin. They transfer the melanin to the keratinocytes, and this is what protects us from sunlight. So a melanin is this protective shield that absorbs or scatters the UV rays, protects against sun damage, and also skin cancer. And we also have a classification in dermatology, which is called the Fitzpatrick skin type classification, which really reflects more how burning and tanning, but is really more used for the lightness or fairness of the skin, going from lighter to darker. So we see Nicole Kidman would be a Fitzpatrick 1, Sarah Parker a 2, Sandra Bullock a 3, and then we got moved into darker skin, Eva Mendes, Halle Berry, and now Naomi Campbell. And this becomes very important because in aesthetics, the skin can absorb a lot of energy in the darker skin types, or even with chemical peels. And sometimes we'll get keloids, or we'll get untoward effects, and we'll get additional pigmentation. So this is one of the things that we're taught in aesthetics. So this sums up what we see in the epidermis, the keratinocytes, stem cells, melanocytes. We've also got those Langerhans cells. Remember, this is part of the innate system, and they're wiggling their little fingers up through the epidermis, always being on the lookout for these pathogens, and then the Merkel cells that are sensitive to touch. So this is an example of what this would look like all put together, from the basal layer with the Merkel cells, the melanocytes, and melanin, the Langerhans cells, and up to the stratum corneum. Okay, now an important area is this dermo-epidermal junction. It's the area right between the epidermis, which is avascular, by the way. If you just scratch yourself and just get the epidermis, there's no bleeding. The dermis has the blood vessels. So we see that in procedures. If we get bleeding, that means we have impacted the dermis. So this is an important area, the dermis-epidermal junction, and it's really the major area of exchange where all the action is. This is where the stem cells are. This is where the nutrients diffuse, where water and waste are done. And this irregular undulating basement membrane. Now, one of the things with aging is that this DE junction tends to flatten out. So we've reduced the surface contact, and then we get skin nutrition becoming compromised. Now let's move down into the dermis. The dermis is where so much of the action comes. When we deliver nutrients, we are delivering nutrients into the skin via the dermis, two parts, the upper papillary dermis and the lower reticular dermis. So we can see there the undulating of the papillary dermis. It is the thinner layer of the two. It's looser connective tissue. There are some capillaries. We will see elastin, reticular, and collagen fibers, and this ground substance, which is so important, we'll talk a little bit about. Sometimes we'll call this the extracellular matrix, which is made up of glycoproteins and proteoglycans, which are just the sugar and protein molecules that make up the substance and attract water and retain water. And they're called glycoproteins if they have more sugar than protein, and proteoglycans if they have more protein than sugar. And then we've got hyaluronic acid in this as well. So that's the ground substance. So these finger-like papillae, and again we've got, much like the gut, we you've got this increased surface area for the exchange of nutrients. Deeper down the dermis, reticular dermis is thicker, it's denser, it's larger blood vessels, it has these interlaced elastin fibers, the coarse network of collagen, and as ground substance. We'll find more of the mast cells and the histiocytes, the immune cells in this area. And we will also find the home of the worker bees, the fibroblasts. So we'll see this matrix of hyaluronic acid, collagen, elastin, and the fibroblasts are woven in there. So they are the ones who manufacture the collagen fibrils. They respond to mechanical stretching. So in doing so, they produce collagen. And in fact, this may contribute to the effect of some of the dermal fillers, the fact that they do respond to stretch. But let's look at this. Collagen is really about 75% of the skin's dry weight. These are these long fibers of protein that you know about. They're tough. They provide strength to the skin. They require vitamin C and iron to form. I think this is important. Later on, when you think a little bit about some of the conditions that we have, the nutritional deficiencies or insufficiencies, when you think a little bit about some of the SNPs, the genetic variants that affect vitamin C for some people, this becomes very, very important. And then there's the MMPs, which are the metallomatrix proteinases. And these are the enzymes that break down collagen. Now, on one hand, they're bad in terms of too much activity, break down too much collagen. But on the other hand, we also need them when we do a process called collagen remodeling, and I'll talk about that momentarily. Inhibiting them are also these TIMPs, these tissue inhibitors of MMP. So we always have this dance going on between degradation, in which case we have MMPs, the matrix metalloproteinases, and the inhibition of them. And remember that these MMPs break down collagen, elastin, and the HAs. So here we see this matrix again. Let's just talk a little bit about elastin, because it doesn't get quite the coverage that collagen gets, but it's really important for this flexibility, this suppleness of the skin. Even though it's less than 1% of the skin's dry weight, these are, again, long fibers of protein. They're stretchy, they're resilient. They allow the skin to bounce back. So essentially, when you're doing a test where you're testing the bounce back ability of the skin, this is what you're really looking at. So with aged elastin, we get sagging and wrinkling. These fibroblasts are also important because they produce the GAGs, the glycosaminoglycans, which are, again, proteins attached to sugars. And they form a gel-like substance. They're responsible for the turgidity. Again, they fill the space. And these are some examples. Hyaluronic acid is the most well-known one, but there's chondroitin sulfate, there's keratin sulfate, dermatan sulfate, heparan sulfate, and even heparin. And what they do is they bind water. So they bind up to 1,000 times their weight in water. And then they are able to attract the water into the dermis, and then this diffuses up into the epidermis. So very important. So the GAGs, hyaluronic acid, by the way, is an inert molecule. The chondroitin sulfate, heparan sulfate are metabolically active. So here's the summary of the fibroblasts. Important for the extracellular matrix. They do put out some growth factors. They create the GAGs, elastin, enzymes, and create collagen. So collagen, in aesthetics, we talk about this process of collagen denaturization and collagen neogenesis, or collagen remodeling. You know, we've got these three chains. We've got glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. And these three amino acids do this little dance. And in aesthetics, what we usually do is heat the skin to 65 degrees centigrade for a period of time, and the collagen contracts, it shortens, and it unravels. And this stimulates a wound healing response. So the fibroblasts then start producing the growth factors, the cytokines, the enzymes. They put out the MMPs, start degrading the old collagen, and it becomes the scaffold on which new collagen remodeling occurs. And this actually takes 6 to 8 weeks for significant production of new collagen. So when you have a laser procedure, that's the period of time. So collagen remodeling can last many months. And then eventually, a little later on, the elastin fibers are created for a thicker and fuller dermis. I'll have to talk. I'll mention hair just very briefly. And from the point of the fact that if you follow the DE junction, the basal cells, you'll see this little thing called the bulge, and that's where a lot of the stem cells are in the hair follicle. So it's important that we get nutrients there as well. When we talk about aging, we talk about intrinsic aging and extrinsic aging. Intrinsic aging, it's natural, biological aging, it's genetic, it's the shortening of the telomeres, it's the decline of hormones, and it makes up about maybe 10-15% of the aging process. We can influence it, but really we can't dictate it. It's happening the day we're born. But there's extrinsic aging, and that's UV exposure, tobacco, diet, alcohol consumption, sedentary lifestyle. So this really represents 85 to 90% of the aging process. And of this, photoaging causes the most cellular damage. And these are the common signs of photo damage. We see these actinic keratoses, these red, rough, scaly spots, these aging lentigos, little dark, pigmented spots, solar elastosis, which is the thick skin, the yellow tone, the leathery skin, vascular lesions, more wrinkles in terms of number and depth. Not a very pretty picture. And so we're all trying to delay this, and nutrition obviously plays a big part in slowing this down. I wonder about this fellow's diet, but really when you look at it, this is a lifetime of exposure to the sun, with the solar lenticos, the thick skin, the dryness, and the elastosis. We also, in aesthetics, talk about the Glogau scale. We group wrinkles into a category, mild, moderate, advanced, and severe, and we'll rate them between 1 and 4. But just to show you the incredible impact of the sun, what do you think this man did for a living? You're right. He drove a car. He drove a truck in this case. And you can see how he did not protect his face from the UV radiation, UVB, and UVA and UVB. And look at the pronounced solar damage on his left side. So we're really talking about oxidative stress when we look at essentially the extrinsic factors. And the fact that all of these things, inflammation, metabolism, smoking, ionizing radiation, air pollution, UV light, can all create DNA damage. And this aging process is affected by a reactive oxidative species and glycation. It affects both of them. You're all familiar with the free radical theory, that we've got these free radicals on the hunt. They're missing an electron, they're unstable, they're highly reactive, and they will take and steal that electron any place they can. And that can be from protein or carbohydrates or lipids, cell membranes, from DNA, any place they can. So they sort of wreak havoc in terms of oxidative stress. So these free radicals, we need to remember that they're created by multiple reactions in the body. Digestion creates them, detox, cell signaling. In some sense, though, they are signals for the immune system to get working. But the important part for nutrition is that they're countered by antioxidants and enzymes to reduce the harmful effects. Hold that in mind. We've got this balance going on. Free radicals are being created, and we need the antioxidants to squelch them. So let's look at the degrees of antioxidant protection. The first line of defense in the skin are the dismutases, the superoxide dismutase. You've heard about a lot, SOD. And this directly scavenges the reactive oxidative species right at the source, and it removes these superoxides that are created. Next, the next line are some of the antioxidant enzymes, and these are the peroxidases, the catalases, and they neutralize the peroxides, which are created in the oxidative process. Next, we have glutathione, and this really is the form that we want to replenish. It's a major antioxidant for the body. It is the major substance for detox. And then on top of that, we have all the things that we add to diet. We have the ascorbate, the tocopherols, the carotenes, even the waste products. Uric acid contribute to this, the chelators, the metal ions. So the goal here is to reduce the radicals and the other oxidants in cells. So this is our defense. So in Feed Your Skin Right, this is the simplest way that I can think about the book. And that is, we've got a $134 billion industry in which people are trying to smear stuff on their face in the hopes that these ingredients will get into the skin. The truth is, the skin is really good at keeping stuff out. I mean, it is a major barrier, and specifically when there's tight junctions, it doesn't let much in. So let's think a little bit about how we get nutrients into the skin. I'm going to ask you to look up this great review called Skin Health from the Inside Out. It's a few years old right now, but still the best synthesis that I've seen of the science. I could add a lot to it, but it's solid. And this is what's interesting. Remember, we've talked a lot about the basal layer, this space where the activity is, where the stem cells are, right at the base of the epidermis, where it connects with the dermis. So let's look at these. These are the defenses. These are the enzymes, the superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, catalase, glutathione reductase. All of these are fighting the effects of oxidative stress. And they are all, in fact, higher in the epidermis. And then we look at the other non-enzymatic antioxidants, the tocopherols, vitamin E, ascorbic acid, vitamin C, coenzyme Q, and uric acid. All of these are higher in the epidermis. Well, that's great. How did they get there? They got there through the bloodstream, uric acid, the coenzyme Q, the ascorbic acid, the tocopherol, and made their way up and became concentrated at the basal layer and influenced the stem cells and the development of the skin. So you can see here some of the antioxidant recommendations: vitamin E, vitamin C, the carotenoids, pycnogenol, resveratrol, and selenium. I could and will add to this list. But just to look at this, just to pick one particular antioxidant, in this case is Polypodium leucotomus. It's a fern extract. This is a study done by Mark Nestor and Brian Berman, and they gave people this extract for 60 days, and it increased the minimal erythema dose, which is the amount of UV radiation to induce a reaction, a red reaction in the skin, and it decreased the ultraviolet-induced erythema intensity. So we can see that these plant phytonutrients do what they're supposed to do. They protect the skin. Now, another thing that we want to think about for the skin is supporting mitochondrial performance. And I'm sure many of you have your favorites. I have colleagues who love alpha-lipoic acid, who love creatine or the CE and Ks. For me, I place a lot of emphasis on coenzyme Q10, particularly because we have so many people taking statins, and then magnesium, which is, again, so critical. It's critical because it's involved in over 300 enzyme systems. And you can see these here from protein synthesis, muscle contraction, nerve function, glucose control, hormone receptor binding, blood pressure, cardiac, ion flux, and the gating of calcium channels. As I move into a discussion of some specific nutrients, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, etc., keep in mind that there are thousands and thousands of studies that we could be citing. Literally, this is an explosive field. I'll just pick some of them. Here we see that a 4-week supplementation of magnesium had great effects on protecting the DNA from oxidative damage. Magnesium may also play a role in skin allergies. So we've seen clinical observations show a benefit of both topical and oral administration in magnesium salts with patients with skin allergies, dampening down the allergic response. Zinc is pretty critical as well. It's an important antioxidant. It protects against UV radiation. It is very important for wound healing, for DNA replication. It promotes optimal cell proliferation, and it has anti-inflammatory properties. So this is a study that showed that zinc has been shown to be bacteriostatic against P. acnes. It inhibits chemotaxis, and it reduces the production of the inflammatory cytokine TNF-alpha. And it can have a positive effect on acne vulgaris. I would think that every patient who has acne should have a zinc level checked and put on a zinc supplement. So let's move now to another approach. I want to talk a little bit about skin health and beauty through the lens of personalized nutrition. Early on, I stated that, that no two people on the planet have the exact same skin. So let's look further into this. If you adopt this personalized nutrition approach, if you're a clinician, you move beyond a standardized one-size-fits-all approach, it's going to change 5 things that you do. It's going to change what you ask, what you observe, what you assess, what you explain, and what you recommend. So let's look very closely at this. So an example was drug nutrient depletion. You're going to ask about that. You're going to observe differently. So this is a great chapter that I want to highlight in Diana Nolan's book on integrative and functional medicine nutrition therapy. This is a chapter that Michael Stone did on skin conditions and medical nutrition therapy. You can buy it individually. It's really good. But here's just one of the excerpts from that text. These are just hair and scalp findings and their nutrient associations. You can see on the left, from dry hair to alopecia, dandruff, hair depigmentation, different shapes and configurations of hair, and the nutrient associated with that. So we want to start doing that. Then let's look at what you're assessing. So I think we can start off with some basic labs. Now, basic labs to me are magnesium, zinc levels, vitamin D levels. Shocking how many people don't know their vitamin D levels. We should be able to get an omega-6, omega-3 ratio. So these are just some of the basic labs that we can get from Quest or LabCorp or whomever. But I'd like to take that a step further and sort of quote Jeff Bland at a talk he gave at the ANA, which really resonated with me. He talked about this article, From Genotype to Phenotype in the Science. Here's what he said. We are a food-based culture, but physiology is determined by nutrients, whose need is determined by the genotype of the individual. So food represents the delivery system for the nutrients that modulate an individual's phenotype. And this, of course, is the definition of nutrigenomics. Part of that phenotype is skin health and beauty and how one appears to everyone around one. As part of this, one of the assessments that I'm really in favor of is a skin nutrigenomic assessment. It's a great way to get buy-in. You could look at the SNPs that affect loss of elasticity. So some people have overactive MMPs that degrade collagen at a greater rate. Some people have SNPs for vitamin A or zinc that require greater amounts. There's SNPs for vitamin E and SNPs for advanced glycation end products, and many other SNPs. So I think this can inform patients and help us decide how much supplementation they need. For example, vitamin D, very common to have SNPs. There's 2 genes that you can have SNPs in that really, if you have them, you will have higher needs for vitamin D. The microbiome has also a profound effect on the skin. We've got the gut, brain, skin axis. Here you see an example of a professional report that looks at an index, diversity, which is really what we want. We want to have great diversity, the richness, the pathogens you find, the keystone species, which are the old gangsters, the good guys, and the functions. This is an example. But I think you want to get familiar with one or more of these tests and use that to also guide your patients as well, because you will have dysbiosis that will contribute to skin conditions. So we see that in this study that there's a functional role for some of the probiotics and prebiotics. that both lactobacilli and bifidobacterium, that kind of supplementation can be helpful, and it can decolonize some of the skin pathogens, particularly the Pseudomonas and the staph version. And then finally, there's advanced laboratory testing that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Most of that is centered around the gut, around organic acids, and around other measurements of gut health. So the next thing, if you buy into this personalized nutrition clinical process, you're going to explain things differently. Here you see a vitamin D level. 6/13/18, it was low. And the physician said, well, take a vitamin D supplement, just go get something over the counter. It moved up to 34.9, and the doc said, oh, great, you're okay, it's normal. But that's not optimal. All of the research that I've seen, that we all see, said that we need our vitamin D closer to 50, maybe even 60, but certainly in a much higher range for immune support, particularly in an era of COVID-19. And then finally, all of this comes back around to the recommendations you make. What do you ask? What do you observe? What do you assess? What do you explain? Finally, what do you recommend? So that ends my session for you. This is my QR code that will take you to my website, drtager.com. This is my COVID garden. I had never gardened before. And COVID was great for my doggie, who got to see me, and for my green thumb, which is developing. And I realized that the personal growth is an analog process as I go out and weed and grow and prune my garden. So thank you very much. Hope that you found this valuable and helpful. Here's how to get a hold of me. Follow me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and I'd encourage you to grab my book, Feed Your Skin Right. It's on Amazon. Thank you.